Alright guys, here's part two to our kind of body types and when it comes to diet and training. So again, before I start, just realize that, the stuff we're going to talk about is in the broadest sense, just kind of generalization. And so what I mean by that is this is good places to start, but depending on, some of your individual characteristics, especially if you're already fairly lean as it is, you may need to take some additional steps with these and kind of dial things in a little bit more based on just some of the unique things that make you to really get the results that you're wanting. But to get started, we'll start with the ectomorphs. Again, diet when it comes to fat loss, you don't want to do a significant cut of calories here. Like I said, this body type has the ability to process a high amount of carbohydrates really, really well. So again, you want to work on slowly decreasing the amount of calories and carbohydrates to ensure that you're not burning up a lot of the muscle mass that you're trying to preserve. So definitely don't do any huge drastic cuts there when you start this out. When it comes to the muscle building and really kind of packing on size, again, high carbohydrate tolerance here. You're going to have to eat. And I mean, like, you got to pack the food in. In some cases, you're almost going to have to force feed yourself. I know when I was doing bodybuilding when I was a little bit younger and I kind of fall in this category, I would literally have to set my alarm and get up in the middle of the night to eat. And like I said, so just think about that. If you're having trouble gaining the weight or continuing to put on size, you gotta pound the food in. A great place to start is when it comes to muscle building, especially take your body weight in kilograms, and you'll need 8 grams of carbohydrates per kilogram. And that's usually, if you're under 15% body fat, that's usually a good place to start. If you're a little bit over that, might not need quite that much, but in general terms, that's a good place to start. When it comes to performance, again, same thing. You've got to eat, you've got to eat, you've got to eat. For this body type, it is really important that you get a lot of higher glycemic carbohydrates, especially pre-workout and post-workout. This is going to ensure that you've got plenty of energy to do your workouts and plenty of energy to recover from your workouts without tapping into the stores that your body has. And a good general rule here is 60 to 80 grams of carbohydrates pre and post, and that is a lot, but like I said, this body type can handle that, so don't be afraid to really pack them in there around these times if you're really trying to focus on your performance. When it comes to training, overall ectomorphs tend to be low neuromuscular functioning athletes, and it's not necessarily like a good or a bad thing. That just simply means based on their 1 rep max, they're not able to generate a high amount of that force consistently. So an example of that is if your 1 rep max back squat is 315 pounds, you could probably put 285, 295 and do it for 6 to 8 reps. And so you're able, like I said, you're able to kind of keep pretty close distance there between doing high reps versus your absolute max. Like I said, not necessarily a good or a bad thing, but when you do that, when you do kind of fall in that category, make sure that you focus on like tempo training. When it comes to mass building, that you're going to get a better bang for your buck there, because you're getting a lot more time under tension. You definitely want to, with this body type, you want to focus on the compound movements. This is your squatting, your pulling, your pressing, your Oli lifts, and all the different variations. A lot of what we do within the aspect of CrossFit. But those need to be your focus. Isolation movements, you need to think of those are going to be your accessory stuff. You always want to do that after the big movements to get the best bang for your buck if you're trying to really build muscle there. When it comes to cardio, even when it comes to like fat loss, you definitely want to focus on intensity more than overall volume. Like I said, this body type responds, fairly well to exercise. So focus again on intensity, not volume. And when it comes to muscle building, you definitely want to keep the time durations pretty short, and I wouldn't recommend more than 2-3 at the most cardiovascular training sessions a week, just so you're not running the risk of burning off that muscle that you're trying to build. All right, mesomorphs, this is our body type. This is kind of some of our symmetrically built fast twitch athletes. They do really well on the balanced diet. When it comes to fat loss and weight loss, again, the key is staying balanced. You definitely want to keep most of your carbohydrates around your workout. And so, your white rice, potatoes, stuff like that, the higher glycemic carbs, keep those in and around, pre and post workout. And then the rest of the time, try to, keep your lower glycemic index, fruits and veggies with that balanced diet. And that'll ensure that you're continuing to, to lose the body fat and preserve that muscle. When it comes to muscle building, again, balance is key. But again, you want to really think about just overall, you're going to have to up everything. You're going to up your carbs, your proteins, and your fats. This body type does really well with kind of this zone format. So you can think about, applying that if you're really trying to, build muscle with this. This body type does really well too. I made a note here. When it comes to like carb cycling and intermediate fasting, this body type does really well with those. Just keep that on the back burner because we're going to cover that in some of our later videos. When it comes to performance, again, same thing here. You're going to have to, again, you want to focus on balance, but think performance for the mesomorph is going to be really similar to the ectomorph, and you want to keep a lot of carbohydrates, definitely around your pre and post workout sessions, as far as, higher amounts and getting off balance. So, example, you might have a meal that might be 60 grams of carbohydrates with only 10 or 15 grams of protein and maybe little to zero fat. So a little bit out of that kind of balance, but that's going to ensure that, again, you've got plenty of energy to do the workouts and recover from your workouts without tapping into reserve stores that the body has. Training here, these athletes tend to be more on the high neuromuscular functioning side. So when you think about, ectomorphs being a low neuromuscular, high neuromuscular, we'll use the same analogy. If you've got a 315 back squat and then we put 285, 295 on the bar, you may only be able to do that for 2 to 3 reps. And what that simply means is you're able to recruit a lot of your central nervous system and get close to maxing out on your power. And like I said, it's not necessarily a good or a bad thing, but what that does mean is overall you need to focus on the intensity of your workouts and not volume. So again, we focus on, the compound movements, isolation movements do really well with this body type. But again, your goal is to think, I'm going to get in, I'm going to hit it really hard, I'm going to get the stimulus from the workout that I'm trying to get, and I'm going to get out. Steady state training does work pretty well for this body type when it comes to, trying to burn body fat. And when I say steady state training, maybe going out, for a light jog or getting on an elliptical or something of that nature for 20 to 30 minutes, being in what we call that fat burning heart rate zone. So that's a good protocol for this body type, to burn body fat without, consuming a lot of that muscle mass. But again, regardless of what you're trying to do with your training here, always focus on, the intensity side of things and not the overall volume side. Our last body type, again, is our endomorph. This is the one, that, has to really focus on their diet and the amount of overall calories. I'm not the biggest fan of doing like calorie counting, but again, I don't really have to be based on my body type. So you want to think about with this body type, think about like you may want to do some calorie counting, but you also need to know your basic metabolic rate. There's different formulas you can use to find your basic metabolic rate. There's also machines, and tests that can be done to find that. And that will just allow you to kind of have a number of, this is how many calories you burn at rest throughout the day. And so by factoring in your basic metabolic rate with your activity range, you're able to really, make sure that we're not going over that amount of calories that we need for that day. Because like I said, this body type, has a hard time, dealing with excess calories and will tend to store those as body fat quicker than the other two. Again, with fat loss too and weight loss in general here, you definitely want to keep your carbohydrate consumption relatively low, and you want to keep those lower glycemic index. So this is some of your fruits, most of your vegetables, sweet potatoes. You're going to minimize some of the white rice, white potatoes, red potatoes, stuff like that. If you are going to consume those, you definitely want to consume those around your workouts. When it comes to muscle building, again, balance is key. You want to focus a lot on your training with this body type. The more muscle mass you have, the faster your basic metabolic rate is going to be. So regardless of whether you're trying to build muscle or burn fat, you definitely want to focus on the weight training side of things. I did make a note here just to backtrack a little bit. Intermediate fasting and keto does really well with this body type for fat loss. But like I said, hold those on the back burner. We'll talk about those in our other segment of videos. When it comes to performance here, again, you want to think about keeping, a majority of your carbohydrates around your training. So what I mean by that, when it comes, if you're strictly chasing performance, or use an arbitrary number of, say, you're only going to get 200 carbohydrates for the day. Well, you would probably want to have anywhere from 40, even up to like 55% of your carbohydrates for the day around your workout, so your pre and post workout. So that's going to ensure that you're able to keep the intensity and push your training to perform the best that you possibly can, but then you're also not consuming a lot of higher glycemic index carbs throughout the rest of the day, so you're not going to be you'll be less likely to store those as body fat. When it comes to training, again, like I mentioned a while ago, weight training is key. This body type, like I said, has problems with excess calories, and you've got to remember, the more muscle mass you have, the higher basic metabolic rate you're going to have, the more calories you'll be able to handle. So weight training is going to be key for this body type, regardless of what you want your results to be. Doesn't matter. Compound lifts, definitely, like I said, those are always going to be a staple, but you want to focus on intensity as well. This body type, this is kind of a generalization and all, but definitely focus on intensity over volume. Steady state training does relatively well here, but you're going to get the best bang for your buck by really pushing the intensity as hard as you possibly can with your workouts. Same deal as we had with our ectos here. You want to think about saving your isolation movements or isolation training for after the workouts or after your big compound movements. And then the last thing that I'm going to talk on here is the interval training for cardio. This type of body type does relatively well with interval training. And what I mean by that is when you look at interval training, an example of, say we're doing, say we're at the track and we're doing sprint workouts. We're doing basically a 400-meter sprint with a 2-minute rest. By doing that, when you look at your session as a whole overall, by doing interval training, your heart rate on average is a lot higher. So this allows you to keep the intensity relatively high, but stretch out some of the time domain where you've got, like I said, on average, a higher heart rate, which is going to be a better bang for your buck when it comes to the fat loss especially. But like I said, this is kind of, like I said, these are some of the broad topics with these different body types. Like I said, if you guys have any questions in general, don't hesitate to ask me or Lindsay. And like I said, we would love to help you guys, figure out what's going to work best for you when it's related to this. And so we hope this helps.